The rifle felt heavier than it should have when Admiral Harrison Burke handed it to Maya Chen, with that familiar smirk of superiority carved into his weathered face. 23 years of naval command had taught him to recognize weakness at a glance, and everything about the young woman standing at attention before him screamed amateur. Her civilian clothes, hastily replaced with borrowed fatigues, hung awkwardly on her athletic frame. Her short black hair, still bearing the remnants of a coach's practical ponytail, caught the harsh fluorescent lights of the Norfolk Naval Station Armory. She was 26 years old, a former university track coach who had enlisted 3 weeks ago after what the papers called a heroic intervention at a campus shooting. Burke saw her differently. He saw someone who needed to learn her place. Before we dive deeper into Maya's extraordinary story, I want to take a moment to connect with you. Tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Let's see what all the fuss is about, Chen, Burke announced loudly enough for the dozen other recruits to hear. The Admiral had deliberately chosen the heaviest rifle in the armory, a vintage M14 with a scope that had been knocked out of alignment during transport. The weapon was technically functional, but practically useless for precision shooting. The kind of equipment that would humble an overconfident civilian who thought she understood military life, because she'd held a security guard's pistol for 12 minutes during a crisis. Maya accepted the rifle without comment, her dark eyes studying the Admiral's face with the same intensity she'd once used to analyze an athlete's form for flaws. She could sense the weight distribution was wrong, feel the subtle vibration in the stock that suggested internal damage, notice the way the scope housing had been slightly loosened. This wasn't a test of marksmanship. This was theater designed to humiliate her in front of an audience. The firing range stretched 200 yards across the Virginia morning, targets positioned at various distances like mathematical problems waiting to be solved. Maya had never been on a military range before, but something about the setup felt familiar. The smell of gun oil and cordite, the sound of wind across open ground, the weight of expectation pressing down like a physical force. It reminded her of something she couldn't quite place, a memory that lurked just beyond conscious recognition. 20 targets, Burke called out, pointing toward the range with theatrical flourish. Let's see if Iowa's newest hero can manage half that with military equipment instead of playing dress-up with the security guard's pea shooter. The other recruits shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the cruelty in their commanding officer's tone. Maya had become something of a legend in the 3 weeks since the university shooting, her face appearing on news programs and magazine covers as an example of civilian heroism under fire. The Admiral clearly resented the attention. Behind them, Staff Sergeant James Rodriguez watched from the observation booth with growing unease. He'd been training recruits for 8 years and had never seen Burke display such obvious personal animosity toward a new arrival. Rodriguez knew the stories about Maya Chen's intervention at the University of Northern Iowa, how she'd protected 17 students from an armed gunman using skills that seemed to emerge from nowhere. The official reports raised more questions than they answered, describing shooting accuracy that defied statistical probability and tactical awareness that shouldn't have existed in a track and field coach. Maya raised the rifle, feeling the awkward balance that confirmed her suspicions about Burke's intentions. The scope had been deliberately sabotaged, the barrel showed signs of impact damage, and the trigger mechanism felt loose enough to throw off any attempt at precision shooting. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting muscle memory she didn't understand take control of her movements. Her grandfather's voice echoed from childhood summers spent at his farm in rural Iowa, teaching her to hunt rabbits with an old bolt-action rifle that had seen service in Korea. "A rifle is just steel and wood, little dragon," Vincent Chen had whispered during those long afternoons when Maya thought she was just learning to hunt. "The shot lives in your heart. Find your center, breathe with the earth, and let the weapon become part of your intention. Maya had thought those were just the philosophical ramblings of an old man who'd seen too much war. Now standing on this military range with a sabotaged rifle and an audience expecting her failure, she realized her grandfather had been teaching her something far more profound. The first target stood at 50 yards, a standard bullseye that should have been elementary for anyone with basic shooting experience. Maya adjusted her stance, compensating for the rifle's damaged balance by shifting her weight in ways that felt instinctive rather than learned. She could sense Admiral Burke's presence behind her, radiating satisfaction at what he expected to be her inevitable failure. The other recruits had fallen silent, creating a bubble of tension that seemed to compress the morning air around her. Maya's finger found the trigger, applying pressure with surgical precision while her mind calculated wind speed, distance, and the complex physics of ballistics with accuracy that surprised her. The shot cracked across the range like controlled thunder, and 200 yards away, the bullet punched through the exact center of the target's bullseye. The silence that followed stretched for 3 heartbeats before murmurs of amazement rippled through the assembled recruits. "Lucky shot," Burke announced dismissively, though his voice carried less conviction than before. "Let's see if you can manage that 19 more times with a real challenge." He gestured toward targets positioned at increasingly difficult angles and distances, including several that required shooting around obstacles or through narrow windows of opportunity. Maya worked the rifle's bolt mechanism with fluid efficiency, ejecting the spent casing and chambering a fresh round. The second shot followed the first trajectory almost exactly, piercing another target dead center. The third shot threaded through a gap between 2 barriers to hit a target that should have been impossible to reach. By the 5th shot, Admiral Burke's confident smirk had transformed into something approaching concern. The demonstration that followed would become legendary within military circles, though the complete truth would never appear in official records. Maya moved through the 20 targets with mechanical precision, each shot finding its mark despite the rifle's obvious defects. She compensated for the damaged scope by using instinctive aiming techniques that shouldn't have been possible. She adjusted for the loose trigger mechanism by applying pressure with fingertip sensitivity that bordered on supernatural. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She overcame the rifle's compromised balance through subtle body adjustments that seemed to flow from muscle memory older than conscious thought. Target 7 fell to a ricochet shot that curved around a steel barrier. Target 12 required Maya to fire while lying prone on uneven ground that should have made accuracy impossible. Target 15 was positioned behind partial cover that left only a 3-inch window of vulnerability. Maya hit them all with the same effortless precision, her shots creating a pattern of destruction that defied every principle of marksmanship Admiral Burke had learned in 2 decades of military service. By target 18, Burke's face had drained of color entirely. He stood behind Maya with his mouth slightly open, watching her accomplish feats that should have required years of advanced training and perfect equipment. The rifle in Maya's hands might as well have been a magic wand for all the sense her performance made within conventional military understanding. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had stopped taking notes and was simply staring at the impossible scene unfolding before him. In 8 years of training recruits, he'd never witnessed shooting that approached Maya's current demonstration. Olympic marksmen would have struggled with half these shots using perfect equipment. Maya was accomplishing them with a sabotaged rifle that should have been impossible to fire accurately. The 19th target was positioned at the maximum range of the course, requiring Maya to account for wind drift, bullet drop, and atmospheric conditions that would challenge experienced snipers. She took her time with this shot, breathing slowly while her enhanced awareness processed variables that her conscious mind couldn't articulate. When she fired, The bullet traced a perfect arc across the morning sky before punching through the target's center ring with mathematical precision. Admiral Burke found his voice as Maya prepared for the final shot. "That's impossible," he said, the words carrying the weight of someone whose understanding of reality had just been fundamentally challenged. "No one shoots like that with a damaged rifle. No one shoots like that, period." Maya turned to face the Admiral, the rifle still cradled in her arms with casual familiarity. For the first time since accepting the weapon, she spoke directly to him. "You gave me broken equipment expecting me to fail. I chose to succeed anyway." Her voice carried calm confidence that made Burke's earlier condescension seem small and petty by comparison. The Admiral stepped closer, his face flushed with embarrassment and growing anger. "Don't get smart with me, recruit. I don't know what kind of publicity stunt you think you're pulling, but this is the real military, not some college campus where they give participation trophies for showing up." Maya set the rifle down carefully, her movements deliberate and controlled. "I'm not pulling any stunts, sir. You challenged me to hit 20 targets with faulty equipment. I have one shot remaining." She gestured toward the final target, positioned at an angle that would require her to fire from an awkward stance, while compensating for both distance and wind. Burke's anger overcame his military discipline. He reached out to grab Maya's arm, intending to end the demonstration before she could complete it and further humiliate him in front of the witnesses. "This performance ends now. Chen, I don't know what kind of enhanced ammunition or trick sighting system you're using, but no civilian recruit shoots like that without cheating." Maya's response was faster than conscious thought. She caught the Admiral's wrist as it approached her arm, applying pressure to specific nerve points that her grandfather had taught her during self-defense lessons she'd forgotten until this moment. Burke gasped in pain and surprise as Maya's grip found the exact anatomical weakness that would immobilize his arm without causing permanent damage. "Sir," Maya said quietly, maintaining the hold while Burke struggled futilely against her technique, "I would appreciate if you didn't interfere with the completion of your challenge." She increased the pressure slightly, causing Burke to sink to one knee as his nervous system responded to stimulation he couldn't resist or understand. The watching recruit stood frozen in shocked silence. No one had ever seen a commanding officer, especially one of Admiral Burke's reputation, rendered helpless by a recruit who weighed perhaps half what he did. Maya held him there for exactly 5 seconds, long enough to make her point without crossing into insubordination, then released him and stepped back. Burke clutched his arm, feeling sensation slowly return while his face cycled through expressions of pain, rage, and complete bewilderment. "You just assaulted a superior officer," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Maya had moved so quickly and precisely that he couldn't even explain what had happened to him. "I defended myself from unwanted physical contact while attempting to complete the challenge you issued," Maya replied calmly. She picked up the rifle again, checking the chamber before turning toward the final target. "Permission to finish the demonstration, sir." Admiral Burke stood slowly, his arm still tingling from whatever nerve manipulation Maya had performed. Every instinct told him to end this situation immediately, to have Maya arrested for assault and removed from his base before she could further undermine his authority. But something in her calm confidence, in the absolute certainty with which she'd handled both the impossible shooting and his own aggressive advance, made him hesitate. "Complete your 20 targets, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya raised the rifle one final time, sighting on a target that required her to fire through a narrow gap between 2 obstacles, while accounting for a crosswind that had been building throughout the demonstration. She breathed slowly, feeling the rhythm of her heartbeat synchronize with the weapon's natural balance point. When she fired, the bullet traveled a path that seemed to defy physics, curving slightly in flight before finding its mark with the Same perfect precision as the 19 shots that had preceded it. The silence that followed was absolute. 20 targets, 20 perfect shots, accomplished with equipment that should have made accuracy impossible. Maya lowered the rifle and turned to face Admiral Burke, who was staring at her with an expression that mixed fear, respect, and complete confusion. 20 targets, as requested, sir, Maya said, offering him the rifle with military courtesy that made her earlier demonstration of physical superiority even more unsettling. Burke accepted the weapon with hands that trembled slightly, his mind racing through implications he couldn't fully process. Chen was supposed to be a college track coach who'd gotten lucky during a campus emergency. Instead, she just demonstrated shooting skills that exceeded anything in his experience and martial arts techniques that had rendered him helpless in seconds. Whatever she wasn't what her official records claimed. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez emerged from the observation booth, his notebook filled with measurements and calculations that made no mathematical sense. He'd recorded the impossible and had no framework for understanding what he'd witnessed. Behind him came other military personnel who'd been drawn by reports of the extraordinary demonstration taking place on Range 7. Among them was Colonel Sarah Mitchell, an intelligence officer whose presence at Norfolk was officially classified as routine liaison work. Mitchell had been tracking reports of exceptional civilian performance since the University of Northern Iowa incident, following patterns that suggested something far more significant than random heroic intervention. Chen's enlistment had triggered automatic flags in intelligence databases that monitored for specific types of unusual capability. Outstanding performance, recruit, Colonel Mitchell said, approaching Maya with the measured stride of someone accustomed to dealing with classified information. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Colonel Mitchell, and I'd very much like to discuss your background and training experience. Maya studied the newcomer, noting details that suggested significance beyond the woman's stated rank. Mitchell carried herself with the confidence of someone whose authority extended far beyond conventional military hierarchy. Her uniform bore minimal decoration, but her bearing suggested extensive experience in situations where such displays would be counterproductive. I don't have any formal training, ma'am, Maya replied carefully. Just what my grandfather taught me about hunting when I was young. It was the same explanation she'd given reporters after the university shooting. Technically true, but incomplete in ways that made her uncomfortable. Colonel Mitchell nodded as if this answer confirmed something she'd already suspected. Vincent Chen, Korean War veteran, served with distinction in Marine reconnaissance units. Quite an accomplished marksman in his own right, according to his service record. The casual mention of details Maya hadn't shared sent a familiar chill down her spine. Admiral Burke watched this exchange with growing confusion and resentment. The demonstration had already undermined his authority more than any recruit should have been able to accomplish. Now intelligence personnel were treating Chen like someone whose background warranted investigation at classified levels. Colonel Mitchell, Burke interjected, I don't know what kind of performance enhancement this recruit is using, but her demonstration clearly violates standard protocols for equipment testing and range safety. It was a weak attempt to reassert control over a situation that had spiraled far beyond his ability to manage. Mitchell turned toward Burke with the patient expression of someone explaining simple concepts to a child. Admiral, what you witnessed today represents exactly the kind of exceptional capability that certain departments are tasked with identifying and developing. Rather than viewing this as a protocol violation, you might consider it a successful recruitment outcome. The conversation that would change Maya's life took place in a sterile conference room 3 floors below the main administrative building at Norfolk Naval Station. Present were Colonel Mitchell, Admiral Burke, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, and a caboo civilian whose introduction raised more questions than it answered. Dr. Rebecca Foster was officially a military psychologist specializing in performance assessment. Unofficially, she was part of a program that didn't appear on any organizational chart. Maya sat at the polished table, still wearing the borrowed fatigues that marked her as a recent recruit, surrounded by personnel whose interest in her abilities clearly extended far beyond routine military evaluation. The demonstration on Range 7 had lasted less than an hour, but it had apparently triggered protocols that reached into the highest levels of military intelligence. "Maya," Colonel Mitchell began, consulting a tablet that contained information Maya was certain she'd never provided. "Your performance today was remarkable, but it wasn't entirely unexpected. We've been monitoring reports of exceptional civilian intervention since the incident at your university, and your subsequent enlistment triggered automatic notifications in several classified databases." Dr. Foster leaned forward, her expression carrying the clinical interest of someone studying a fascinating psychological case. "The shooting at University of Northern Iowa lasted 14 minutes. In that time, you neutralized an armed gunman using tactics and marksmanship that shouldn't have been possible for someone with your documented background. Today's demonstration suggests those abilities weren't situational anomalies." Maya felt the familiar weight of scrutiny that had followed her since the campus shooting. The official story spoke of heroic civilian intervention and remarkable composure under pressure. The unofficial reports, the ones that appeared in classified law enforcement files, described precision shooting and tactical awareness that defied explanation. She'd enlisted partly to escape the media attention, but mostly to understand what had awakened inside her during those 14 minutes of chaos. "I've told everyone the same thing," Maya said carefully. "My grandfather taught me to hunt when I was young. During the shooting, training I didn't know I had just took over." It was the explanation she'd given to reporters, FBI investigators, and university counselors. Each repetition made it sound more hollow, even to her own ears. Admiral Burke, his arm still tender from Maya's earlier demonstration of physical capability, spoke with barely contained frustration. "Colonel, this recruit assaulted a superior officer and then performed impossible shooting feats with damaged equipment. Either she's using some kind of enhancement technology or there are serious security concerns we need to address." Colonel Mitchell's response carried the weight of information that Admiral Burke clearly wasn't cleared to receive. "Admiral, Maya's abilities fall within parameters we've been monitoring for several years. What she demonstrated today is exceptional, but not unprecedented. The question is whether she's interested in exploring the full extent of her capabilities." The offer hung in the air between them, carrying implications that Maya couldn't fully understand, but recognized as significant. The people in this room knew more about her abilities than she did, had been tracking her performance through channels she'd never suspected existed. Her choice was between accepting their guidance or remaining ignorant of what she was becoming. "What exactly are you offering?" Maya asked, though part of her dreaded the answer. Dr. Foster answered with the careful precision of someone accustomed to recruitment conversations. "Maya, there are individuals throughout history who've displayed capabilities that exceed normal human parameters. Enhanced reaction times, superior pattern recognition, intuitive tactical awareness. Abilities that seem almost supernatural, but represent optimization of human potential most people never access." Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who'd been silent throughout the briefing, finally spoke up. "Ma'am, are you saying recruits like Maya are part of some kind of experimental program?" His question carried the concern of someone who'd trained thousands of normal military personnel and recognized that Maya represented something entirely different. "Not experimental," Colonel Mitchell corrected. "Investigational. We're trying to understand why certain individuals display these capabilities and how they can be developed responsibly." Maya's grandfather participated in a classified research program during the Korean conflict. Her abilities may represent inherited traits that we're only beginning to understand. The revelation about Vincent Chen's military service explained nothing while raising dozens of new questions. Maya's memories of her grandfather centered on quiet summers at his Iowa farm, learning to hunt and fish while he shared stories about patience, discipline, and the importance of understanding your environment. She'd never suspected his military background included classified research. What kind of research? Maya asked, though she sensed the answer would fundamentally alter her understanding of herself and her family. Dr. Foster's explanation would haunt Maya for years to come. During the Korean War, military researchers identified soldiers who seemed to possess enhanced combat capabilities, superior marksmanship, tactical awareness that bordered on prescience, physical coordination that exceeded normal human parameters. A small program was established to study these individuals and determine whether their abilities could be replicated or enhanced. The weight of genetic inheritance settled over Maya like a heavy blanket. Her grandfather's patient lessons about hunting and self-defense hadn't been simple recreation. They'd been the transmission of capabilities that had been dormant in her DNA until awakened by extreme stress. The 14 minutes of chaos at the university had cracked open potential that had been waiting her entire life for the right catalyst. "So I'm some kind of genetic experiment?" Maya asked, trying to process information that challenged everything she'd believed about herself. "You're the descendant of someone who participated in groundbreaking research into human potential," Colonel Mitchell replied. "What that means for your future depends on choices you make starting now. We can help you understand and develop these abilities, or you can complete basic training and serve in conventional military roles while pretending to be someone you're not." The choice represented a crossroads that Maya recognized as permanent. The demonstration on Range 7 had already marked her as exceptional within military systems. Admiral Burke would ensure that word of her abilities spread through official channels, making anonymity impossible regardless of her decision. She could embrace what she was becoming, or spend her military service being studied and managed by people who feared what they couldn't understand. "If I agree to this development program," Maya said slowly, "what would it involve?" Colonel Mitchell's smile was both reassuring and unsettling. "Training like you've never experienced. Techniques that build on the foundation your grandfather provided. Equipment designed for precision work. Eventually, missions where your unique capabilities could save lives that can't be saved through conventional military operations." The phrase precision work carried implications Maya couldn't miss. She was being recruited for something that involved more than advanced marksmanship training. The people in this room saw her as a potential weapon whose capabilities could be focused on specific targets under specific circumstances. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez cleared his throat, his discomfort with the conversation apparent. "Colonel, with respect, Recruit Chen just completed basic intake processing. Shouldn't she have time to consider options this significant?" Dr. Foster answered before Colonel Mitchell could respond. "Sergeant, Maya's abilities make her valuable to various interested parties. Delaying development while she considers options creates security risks we prefer to avoid. Sometimes the safest choice is immediate integration into protected programs." The implicit threat was clear. Maya's abilities had made her a person of interest to organizations that operated beyond conventional military oversight. Her choice wasn't really between development and normal service. It was between voluntary cooperation and involuntary management by people who considered her too dangerous for independent operation. Admiral Burke, who'd been growing increasingly uncomfortable with discussions that clearly exceeded his security clearance, finally stood to leave. "Colonel Mitchell, I trust you'll handle this situation through appropriate channels. I have a base to run and recruits to train." His departure carried the bitter recognition that Maya Chen was beyond his authority or understanding. After Burke left, the conversation took on a more serious tone. Colonel Mitchell activated security protocols that sealed the conference room and engaged electronic countermeasures that would prevent surveillance of their discussion. "Maya," she began, What we're about to discuss is classified at levels that could result in serious legal consequences if disclosed. Are you prepared for that level of responsibility? Maya considered the weight of secrets that could reshape her understanding of military operations, genetic inheritance, and human potential. The person who'd walked into this room was a former track coach seeking structure and purpose after a traumatic experience. The person who would leave would be someone whose life had been permanently altered by knowledge that came with prices she couldn't yet calculate. "I'm prepared," Maya said, though she had no idea what that preparation would ultimately cost her. The briefing that followed would introduce Maya to a world of classified programs, genetic research, and operational requirements that existed in the shadows, between conventional military service and intelligence operations that most people never imagined. Her grandfather's legacy would prove to be both gift and burden, providing capabilities that made her valuable while marking her as someone who could never again live an ordinary life. Dr. Foster's psychological evaluation began immediately, designed to assess Maya's mental stability and moral framework before additional classified information could be shared. The question seemed routine at first, but gradually probed deeper into Maya's motivations, fears, and ethical boundaries. "Tell me about the moment you realized you were in danger at the university," Dr. Foster said, her voice carrying the practiced neutrality of someone accustomed to discussing trauma with exceptional individuals. Maya closed her eyes, allowing memories she'd tried to suppress to surface with painful clarity. "I was reviewing game film with 3 of my athletes when we heard gunshots in the main hallway. Multiple weapons, moving systematically through the building. I knew immediately that hiding wouldn't be enough." The clinical recollection of tactical assessment surprised Maya even as she spoke it. During the crisis, she'd processed information about weapon types, shooter locations, and tactical intentions with accuracy that shouldn't have been possible for a civilian. The knowledge had seemed to emerge from nowhere, guiding her through decisions that had saved 17 lives while putting her own at extreme risk. "What did you do next?" Dr. Foster prompted, making notes on her tablet as Maya continued. "I moved my athletes to the equipment room and told them to barricade the door from inside. Then I retrieved the security supervisor's sidearm from his office and positioned myself where I could intercept the shooters before they reached the gymnasium." Maya paused, remembering the weight of the pistol in her hands and the absolute certainty that had guided her movements. Dr. Foster leaned forward slightly. "Maya, you'd never fired a handgun before that day. How do you explain the accuracy of your intervention?" It was the question that had haunted Maya since the shooting, the gap between her documented experience and her actual performance that defied every attempt at rational explanation. "I can't explain it. When I saw those men coming down the hallway, everything became clear. Their positioning, their movement patterns, the angles I needed to prevent them from reaching the students. It felt like remembering something I'd always known but never accessed." The psychological profile that emerged from Dr. Foster's evaluation would become a template for identifying other individuals with similar genetic inheritance. Maya displayed stress optimization rather than stress degradation under extreme pressure. Her cognitive processing accelerated during crisis situations rather than breaking down. Most significantly, she demonstrated intuitive tactical awareness that seemed to access information through channels that conventional psychology couldn't explain. Colonel Mitchell reviewed the evaluation results while Maya waited in an adjacent room. The assessment confirmed what the Range 7 demonstration had suggested. Maya Chen represented capabilities that transcended normal military parameters. Her psychological stability made her suitable for operational development, but her moral framework would require careful consideration when designing mission assignments. "She's different from the others we've identified," Dr. Foster concluded, studying brain scan results that showed neural activity patterns unlike anything in their database. Maya's abilities seemed to integrate seamlessly with her personality, rather than creating the psychological fractures we've observed in other enhanced individuals. The revelation that Maya wasn't unique both relieved and unsettled her. Learning that others shared her strange inheritance provided context for abilities that had seemed impossibly isolated. But discovering that some enhanced individuals had suffered psychological damage raised questions about the long-term costs of genetic optimization that her grandfather's generation had pioneered. Colonel Mitchell returned to brief Maya on the next phase of her development, her expression carrying the weight of decisions that would determine the trajectory of Maya's military career and personal life. "Maya," she began, "you have capabilities that make you extraordinarily valuable for certain types of operations. But developing those capabilities requires training that goes far beyond conventional military instruction. Are you prepared to enter a program that will fundamentally change how you understand yourself and your role in protecting others?" The question crystallized everything Maya had been struggling with since the university shooting. She'd enlisted, seeking answers about what had awakened inside her during those 14 minutes of crisis. Now she was being offered those answers, along with the responsibility that came with fully understanding what she was becoming. "I'm prepared," Maya said, though she couldn't have predicted the challenges that would test that preparation in ways that would push her beyond every moral and psychological boundary she'd ever imagined. The decision to accept advanced development would take Maya from Norfolk Naval Station to a classified facility hidden in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where she would discover that her grandfather's legacy included not just enhanced capabilities, but a family history intertwined with research that had been deemed too dangerous to continue. Her training would prepare her for missions that couldn't be acknowledged or discussed, operations where her unique abilities could mean the difference between protecting innocent lives and allowing catastrophic losses that conventional military forces couldn't prevent. But first, she would have to survive the psychological and physical challenges of becoming something that existed at the intersection of human potential and genetic optimization, guided by instructors who understood that enhanced individuals could either become protectors of innocent people or threats to the stability of democratic institutions. Maya's choice had been made, but the person who emerged from advanced development would be someone whose relationship with conventional human society had been permanently altered by capabilities that transcended normal limitations while demanding moral choices that would test every principle she'd ever held sacred. Hidden background and catalyst, the University of Northern Iowa Gymnasium had always been Maya's sanctuary, a place where the rhythmic sound of sneakers on polished hardwood and the focused breathing of dedicated athletes created a symphony of human potential being realized. As head track and field coach, she'd spent 6 years transforming that space into something more than a training facility. It was a laboratory where young people discovered what their bodies and minds could accomplish when pushed beyond perceived limitations. On the evening that would change her life forever, Maya was reviewing performance videos with 3 of her best distance runners when the first shots echoed through the academic building next door. The sound cut through the gymnasium's usual evening quiet like thunder in a clear sky, immediately recognizable to anyone who'd grown up in rural Iowa where hunting was a way of life. But these weren't hunting rifles being fired at distant targets. These were automatic weapons being discharged in controlled bursts, the kind of disciplined fire that spoke of military training and tactical purpose. Maya's first instinct was to dismiss the sounds as construction noise or perhaps some kind of maintenance work that involved pneumatic tools. But something deeper in her consciousness, a survival mechanism she didn't know she possessed, was already analyzing the acoustic signature of those distant reports. The pattern was wrong for construction equipment. The timing suggested coordination between multiple shooters. The location indicated movement through the academic building in a systematic pattern that spoke of predetermined targets and tactical planning. Coach Chen, said Jennifer Walsh, one of her senior athletes, looking up from the video analysis they'd been conducting. Was that thunder? The weather report didn't mention storms tonight. Jennifer was a dedicated student whose academic performance matched her athletic achievements, the kind of young person who made coaching feel like a calling rather than a job. Maya held up her hand for silence, her enhanced hearing focusing on sounds that seemed to be growing closer to their location. What she heard made her blood run cold. Screaming, not the playful shouts of students enjoying weekend activities, but the primal terror of people confronting imminent death. Mixed with those human sounds were the mechanical noises of doors being forced open, furniture being overturned, and the unmistakable crack of gunfire, continuing its methodical progression through the building. "That's not thunder," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying a calm authority that surprised her. "Everyone needs to move to the equipment room immediately, now." Something in her tone cut through the athlete's confusion, triggering the kind of immediate compliance that comes from recognizing genuine leadership under pressure. The three students, Jennifer Walsh, Marcus Thompson, and Lisa Rodriguez, moved toward the equipment room with the fluid coordination of people who'd trained together for years. But Maya's attention was already focused on tactical considerations that seemed to emerge from nowhere in her consciousness. The gymnasium had 3 entrances, each offering different advantages for defense or escape. The equipment room could be secured from inside, but offered no secondary exit route. The building's layout created natural choke points that could be used to channel attackers into disadvantageous positions. As her athletes secured themselves in the equipment room, Maya moved toward the security supervisor's office with purposeful stride. David Martinez had been on duty that evening, conducting his usual rounds of the athletic facilities when the emergency had begun. Maya found him slumped against his desk, conscious but bleeding from a shoulder wound that suggested he'd encountered the attackers and barely escaped with his life. "Coach," Martinez gasped, his face pale from blood loss and shock. 3 men, maybe 4, military gear, automatic weapons. They're moving through the academic building systematically. I tried to radio campus security, but they jammed my communications before I could complete the call. His service weapon, a standard police issue, Glock 17, lay on the desk where he'd placed it after realizing he was too badly injured to use it effectively. Maya picked up the pistol with hands that moved with surprising confidence. She'd never held a handgun before that moment, had never received formal weapons training, beyond the basic hunting instruction her grandfather had provided during childhood summers. But something about the weapon's weight and balance felt familiar, as if her hands contained muscle memory that her conscious mind had never developed. The tactical situation crystallized in Maya's awareness with startling clarity. The attackers were moving through the academic building in a pattern that would bring them to the gymnasium within minutes. Their jamming of campus communications meant that law enforcement response would be delayed until someone could reach an outside phone line. The students barricaded in the equipment room were safe for the moment, but only if Maya could prevent the attackers from reaching their location. Maya checked the pistol's magazine, noting that it contained 15 rounds plus 1 in the chamber. 16 shots to stop multiple attackers armed with automatic weapons and military equipment. Under normal circumstances, the mathematics of the situation would have been hopeless. But as Maya positioned herself in the gymnasium's main entrance, something extraordinary began to happen in her nervous system. Time seemed to slow as her enhanced awareness processed information at superhuman speed. She could track the attackers' movement through the building by analyzing the acoustic signatures of their footsteps and equipment. Their tactical communications, despite being transmitted on encrypted frequencies, somehow became comprehensible to her enhanced hearing. Most remarkably, her spatial awareness expanded to encompass the entire building layout, allowing her to predict their approach routes with accuracy that defied normal human perception. The first attacker appeared in the gymnasium doorway exactly where Maya's enhanced awareness had predicted he would. He was dressed in tactical gear that spoke of professional military training, carrying an assault rifle with practiced familiarity. His movement into the space was methodical and careful, the approach of someone who understood urban combat and expected resistance. Maya's first shot took him center mass before he could fully process her presence. The precision of the hit surprised her almost as much as it surprised the attacker, who collapsed with an expression of shock that suggested he'd never expected to encounter effective resistance from a college track coach. But Maya's enhanced awareness was already tracking the positions of his companions, calculating angles and distances for engagements that hadn't yet begun. The second attacker entered through the gymnasium's side door, attempting to flank Maya's position while his partner provided covering fire from the main entrance. But Maya's enhanced perception allowed her to track both threats simultaneously, processing their coordination and predicting their tactical decisions before they could implement them. Her second and third shots eliminated both attackers with surgical precision that seemed to violate the laws of probability and marksmanship. The final member of the attack team attempted to retreat when he realized his entire unit had been neutralized by a single defender armed with a handgun. But Maya's enhanced hearing tracked his movement through the building's corridors, and her enhanced spatial awareness allowed her to predict his escape route. Her final shots were fired through interior walls, using ricochet angles that shouldn't have been possible to calculate without advanced ballistics training. When campus security finally arrived 14 minutes after the attack began, they found Maya standing calmly in the gymnasium surrounded by evidence of tactical precision that defied every assumption about civilian capability under stress. The 4 attackers were dead, each eliminated by shots that demonstrated marksmanship accuracy typically associated with military special operations personnel. Maya herself appeared unshaken by the violence, her demeanor suggesting someone who'd been trained for exactly this type of crisis. The official investigation that followed raised more questions than it answered. The attackers were identified as members of a domestic terrorist organization with grievances against the university's research programs and student diversity initiatives. Their equipment and training suggested military backgrounds and access to advanced tactical gear. But most puzzling was Maya's performance during the engagement, which seemed to transcend every known parameter for civilian response to armed assault. FBI ballistics experts confirmed that Maya had fired 16 shots with 16 hits, each one placed with precision that suggested professional marksmanship training. Her tactical movement during the engagement indicated spatial awareness and threat assessment capabilities that typically required years of military or law enforcement experience to develop. Most remarkably, psychological evaluation revealed that Maya had experienced enhanced performance under extreme stress rather than the degradation that affects most people during life-threatening situations. The media attention that followed transformed Maya from an unknown college coach into a national symbol of civilian heroism under fire. But the classified reports filed by federal investigators painted a different picture, describing capabilities that couldn't be explained through conventional understanding of human performance under stress. Those reports would eventually reach intelligence databases that monitored for specific types of exceptional individual capability. Maya's decision to enlist in the military 3 weeks later was driven partly by a desire to escape media scrutiny, but primarily by a need to understand what had awakened inside her during those 14 minutes of crisis. The person who'd walked into that gymnasium was a dedicated coach whose greatest challenge had been motivating young athletes to achieve their potential. The person who'd emerged was someone whose ability seemed to transcend normal human limitations in ways that demanded explanation. The farm where Maya had spent childhood summers with her grandfather suddenly took on new significance as she tried to understand the source of capabilities that had saved 17 lives through tactics and marksmanship that she'd never been taught. Vincent Chen's patient lessons about hunting and self-defense began to seem less like recreational instruction and more like systematic preparation for challenges he'd never explicitly discussed. Maya's mother, Linda Chen, a high school principal in Cedar Falls, struggled to reconcile the daughter she'd raised with the person who'd emerged from the university shooting. "Your grandfather always said you had something special," Linda told Maya during one of their conversations about enlistment. "He used to watch you practice with that old rifle and get this look in his eyes, like he was seeing something the rest of us couldn't understand." Those childhood memories took on new weight as Maya prepared for military service. The hunting lessons that had seemed like simple recreation now felt like systematic instruction in capabilities that went far beyond marksmanship. Vincent Chen had taught her to read wind patterns by observing grass movement, to calculate distances by analyzing atmospheric conditions, to move through terrain without disturbing the environment in ways that would alert prey to her presence. But it was the mental discipline her grandfather had emphasized that seemed most relevant to what had happened during the university shooting. "The mind must become like still water," he'd told her during those summer afternoons when Maya thought she was just learning to hunt rabbits. "When the surface is calm, you can see clearly to the bottom. When your awareness is quiet, you can perceive things that chaos would hide." Maya's enhanced performance during the crisis had felt exactly like that state of mental stillness her grandfather had described, a condition where time seemed to slow and information became available through channels that normal consciousness couldn't access. The tactical awareness, the precision marksmanship, the ability to process multiple threats simultaneously, all of it had emerged from a place of calm focus that felt both foreign and familiar. Dr. Rebecca Foster's psychological evaluation during Maya's military processing had focused heavily on this aspect of her performance. "Describe your mental state during the engagement," Foster had prompted during their initial session. Maya's answer had surprised them, both with its clinical precision. It felt like everything became clear. Not just what was happening, but what was going to happen. "I could see the attackers' movements before they made them, predict their decisions before they implemented them." The revelation that her grandfather had served in a classified military program during the Korean War provided context that Maya had never suspected existed. Vincent Chun's patient instruction hadn't been simple hunting lessons. They'd been the transmission of capabilities developed through research that pushed human performance beyond recognized limitations. Maya's genetic inheritance included not just her grandfather's DNA, but modifications that had been dormant until awakened by extreme stress. The decision to accept advanced military development represented Maya's commitment to understanding what she was becoming, but it also marked her transition from someone who'd used exceptional abilities reactively to someone who would learn to employ them proactively. The university shooting had revealed her potential. Military training would determine how that potential would be focused and controlled. The Awakening Discovery Camp Blackwater nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains like a corporate retreat center that had been designed to blend seamlessly with the natural environment. From aerial surveillance, the facility appeared to be nothing more than a collection of modest buildings scattered among dense forest, their design carefully crafted to avoid attracting attention from commercial or military satellites. But Maya's enhanced perception immediately detected details that contradicted the benign appearance. The security measures were subtle but comprehensive. Motion sensors were disguised as weather monitoring equipment. Communications arrays were hidden within structures that appeared to be cell phone towers. Personnel moved through the facility with the kind of coordinated awareness that spoke of military training and classified operations. Maya realized she was entering a world that existed in the shadows, between conventional military service and intelligence operations that most people never imagined. Colonel Sarah Mitchell had accompanied Maya on the helicopter flight from Norfolk, using the travel time to brief her on what she called expanded capability development. The conversation had been carefully worded to avoid specific operational details, but Maya understood that she was being recruited for missions that couldn't be acknowledged through official channels. "Maya," Mitchell had explained as their aircraft approached the landing zone, "what you demonstrated at Norfolk represents raw potential that requires careful development. The facility you're about to enter specializes in helping individuals like yourself understand and control capabilities that transcend normal human parameters." The personnel who met Maya at the landing zone included Dr. Foster, whom she recognized from Norfolk, and several individuals whose introductions raised immediate questions. Master Sergeant Tony Vasquez carried himself with the bearing of someone whose military experience included operations that weren't discussed in conventional military circles. Lieutenant Marcus Webb's youthful appearance contradicted the analytical intensity in his eyes that suggested extensive experience with classified intelligence operations. Most intriguing was Sergeant First Class Deanna Park, whose greeting included a handshake that lasted exactly long enough for Maya to sense enhanced physical conditioning and reaction speeds that matched her own. "Welcome to Advanced Development," Park said with a slight smile that suggested shared understanding of capabilities that couldn't be discussed openly. The briefing that followed took place in a conference room whose electronic security measures were more sophisticated than anything Maya had encountered in conventional military facilities. Present were Mitchell, Foster, Vasquez, Webb, and two individuals whose introductions came with security classifications that prevented disclosure of their complete backgrounds. Agent Thomas Wright was identified only as a Defense Intelligence Agency operative specializing in exceptional individual capability assessment. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison was described as a research psychologist whose work focused on genetic factors that influenced human performance under extreme stress. Both carried themselves with the kind of careful neutrality that spoke of extensive experience with classified information. "Maya," Mitchell began, activating security protocols that sealed the conference room and engaged countermeasures against electronic surveillance. "What we're about to discuss is classified at levels that carry serious legal consequences if disclosed inappropriately. Are you prepared for that level of responsibility?" Maya considered the weight of secrets that could fundamentally alter her understanding of human potential, genetic inheritance, and military operations that existed beyond public oversight. The person entering this room was a former college coach, seeking answers about abilities that had emerged during a crisis. The person who would leave would be someone whose life had been permanently altered by knowledge that came with prices she couldn't yet calculate. "I understand the implications," Maya replied, though she sensed that complete understanding would come only through experiences that couldn't be adequately described in briefings. Dr. Morrison's presentation began with historical context that reframed Maya's understanding of military research during the Korean conflict. Between 1951 and 1953, Morrison explained, consulting classified documents that had never been publicly acknowledged, military researchers identified soldiers who displayed exceptional combat capabilities that seemed to transcend normal human limitations. The program that emerged from this identification was called Operation Pinnacle, a classified research initiative designed to understand and potentially replicate the enhanced performance observed in select combat personnel. Participants underwent extensive testing that examined everything from reaction times and spatial awareness to psychological profiles and genetic markers that might explain their exceptional abilities. "Your grandfather was one of 17 subjects who completed the full research protocol," Morrison continued, showing Maya personnel files that revealed a side of Vincent Chen she'd never suspected. Sergeant Vincent Chen demonstrated marksmanship accuracy that exceeded established parameters, tactical awareness that seemed almost prescient, and stress optimization that allowed peak performance under conditions that incapacitated most personnel. Agent Wright took over the briefing, providing details about the program's methodology and results that had been classified for 7 decades. Operation Pinnacle wasn't attempting to create enhanced soldiers through artificial means. The research focused on understanding natural variations in human capability and determining whether exceptional performance could be systematically developed. The genetic component of the research had produced findings that military leadership wasn't prepared to acknowledge publicly. Some participants displayed inherited traits that seemed to confer advantages in combat situations, suggesting that enhanced capability might be passed down through family lines in ways that conventional genetics couldn't explain. Participants were monitored for decades after the program ended, Wright explained. Most displayed continued exceptional performance in civilian occupations, but their abilities remained dormant unless activated by extreme stress or specific environmental triggers. Maya felt pieces of her personal puzzle clicking into place. With disturbing clarity, her grandfather's patient instruction during childhood summers hadn't been random recreational activity. He'd been systematically preparing her to access capabilities that he knew she'd inherited, but that would remain dormant until circumstances required their activation. Dr. Foster's psychological assessment provided additional context for Maya's performance during the university shooting. Enhanced individuals typically display several consistent characteristics, Foster explained. Stress optimization rather than stress degradation under pressure. Accelerated information processing during crisis situations. Intuitive tactical awareness that seems to access environmental data through channels that normal consciousness can't utilize. The brain scans conducted during Maya's evaluation at Norfolk had revealed neural activity patterns that matched profiles developed during Operation Pinnacle research. Her nervous system showed optimization for rapid decision-making and precise motor control that exceeded normal human parameters. Most significantly, her stress response activated enhanced performance rather than triggering the degradation that affects most people during life-threatening situations. Maya, Mitchell said, "You're not unique, but you're extraordinarily rare. We've identified fewer than 50 individuals worldwide who display capabilities consistent with Operation Pinnacle genetic inheritance. Most never encounter situations extreme enough to activate their potential. Those who do often struggle to understand or control what they experience." The revelation that Maya wasn't alone in possessing enhanced abilities provided both relief and concern. Learning that others shared her strange inheritance offered context for capabilities that had seemed impossibly isolated. But discovering that enhanced individuals were being systematically identified and monitored raised questions about governmental oversight and personal autonomy that made her uncomfortable. Master Sergeant Vasquez addressed those concerns with the practical perspective of someone who'd worked extensively with exceptional personnel. "Maya, individuals with your capabilities inevitably attract attention from various interested parties. Developing your abilities within official programs provides protection and resources that independent operation couldn't offer." The implicit message was clear. Maya's demonstration at Norfolk had marked her as someone whose abilities warranted monitoring regardless of her preferences. Her choice was between voluntary cooperation with development programs or involuntary management by organizations that considered enhanced individuals too valuable to operate independently. Lieutenant Webb's intelligence briefing revealed the broader context that made Maya's development urgent. Foreign intelligence services have their own programs for identifying and recruiting enhanced individuals, Webb explained, showing satellite imagery of facilities in various countries that appeared to be conducting similar research. Competition for exceptional personnel has become a significant factor in international intelligence operations. The possibility that enhanced abilities might be developed for hostile purposes added strategic importance to Maya's recruitment. Her capabilities could be used to protect American interests or, if she were recruited by foreign powers, to threaten them. The military's investment in her development was both an opportunity and an insurance policy against her potential recruitment by adversaries. Dr. Morrison's final presentation addressed the question that had haunted Maya since the university. Shooting. What was the full extent of her potential? Operation Pinnacle research suggested that enhanced individuals might be capable of performance levels that we didn't have frameworks for measuring, Morrison explained. Your grandfather displayed remarkable abilities, but we believe he accessed only a fraction of what genetic optimization might make possible. The implications were both exciting and terrifying. Maya had already demonstrated capabilities that exceeded normal human parameters, but she might be capable of performance levels that transcended current understanding of human potential. The question was whether such capabilities could be developed safely without psychological costs that made the enhancement counterproductive. What happened to the other Operation Pinnacle participants? Maya asked, sensing that the answer would be significant for understanding her own future. Dr. Foster's response was carefully worded, but disturbing in its implications. Most participants lived normal lives after military service, but several displayed psychological instability that seemed related to their enhanced capabilities. The combination of exceptional abilities and normal social expectations created tensions that some individuals couldn't resolve successfully. The briefing concluded with an offer that would determine the trajectory of Maya's military career and personal life. Advanced development would provide systematic training and capability enhancement, tactical applications, and psychological integration techniques designed to prevent the instability that had affected some Operation Pinnacle participants. But it would also commit Maya to operational assignments that couldn't be discussed or acknowledged through conventional military channels. Maya, Mitchell said, your abilities make you extraordinarily valuable for protecting American interests. In situations where conventional military or intelligence operations would be impossible or inappropriate. But developing those abilities requires training that will fundamentally change how you understand yourself and your role in national security. Maya's response would determine whether she became an enhanced operative whose capabilities served strategic objectives or remained a talented individual whose potential was never fully realized. The choice carried implications for her personal relationships, her understanding of human potential, and her role in protecting innocent people from threats that conventional authorities couldn't address. I want to understand what I'm capable of, Maya said finally, but I need to know that my abilities will be used to protect people, not to serve political objectives that compromise my principles. Mitchell's smile suggested that Maya's moral framework was exactly what made her suitable for the operations they had in mind. Maya, the missions we're considering require someone whose primary motivation is protecting innocent lives. Political compromises and strategic accommodations are handled by conventional military and intelligence personnel. Enhanced operatives focus on threats that require capabilities beyond normal human parameters to address. The decision to proceed with advanced development marked Maya's transition from exceptional individual to operational asset, whose capabilities would be systematically enhanced and focused on missions that existed in the gray areas between military operations and intelligence activities. But it also marked her acceptance of responsibilities that would test every moral principle she'd ever held sacred while determining whether enhanced human potential could be employed ethically in an increasingly complex world. Recognition and consequences. The Advanced Capability Development Center occupied a series of underground levels beneath Camp Blackwater that Maya hadn't suspected existed during her initial briefing. Access required biometric identification, psychological assessment, and security clearances that reached levels she'd never known existed within military classification systems. The elevator that carried her down 3 stories below ground level opened onto corridors that felt more like a research laboratory than a military training facility. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison personally conducted Maya's orientation to the facilities. Capabilities, beginning with a medical evaluation that went far beyond anything required for conventional military service. The examination included genetic analysis, neurological mapping, and psychological testing designed to establish baseline measurements for capabilities that transcended normal human parameters. Maya, Morrison explained as they moved through corridors lined with equipment that seemed more appropriate for a university research center than a military installation. Developing enhanced abilities requires understanding exactly what we're working with. Your genetic inheritance from Operation Pinnacle represents modifications that affect everything from reaction times to information processing capabilities. The testing protocols that followed would have been familiar to Maya if she'd known about her grandfather's participation in classified research 7 decades earlier. Reaction time measurements revealed response speeds that approached the theoretical limits of human nervous system function. Spatial awareness assessments indicated perception capabilities that extended far beyond normal visual and auditory processing. Most remarkably, stress response evaluation showed that Maya's performance actually improved under conditions that degraded the capabilities of normal individuals. Master Sergeant Vasquez oversaw the physical conditioning component of Maya's evaluation, designing protocols that pushed her beyond the limits that constrained conventional military personnel. Enhanced individuals require training regimens that match their enhanced physiology, Vasquez explained as Maya completed obstacle courses that would have challenged special operations personnel. Standard military conditioning doesn't provide adequate stimulation for nervous systems that operate beyond normal parameters. The results of Maya's physical assessment exceeded every expectation that development staff had established based on her grandfather's Operation Pinnacle performance. Her cardiovascular efficiency, muscular coordination, and endurance capabilities suggested optimization that went beyond anything documented in the historical research. Maya was displaying enhanced performance that seemed to represent evolutionary advancement rather than simple genetic variation. Lieutenant Webb conducted intelligence capability assessments that revealed Maya's potential for operational applications beyond marksmanship and physical performance. Her ability to process multiple information streams simultaneously made her suitable for surveillance and counter-surveillance operations. Her enhanced spatial awareness allowed her to track multiple subjects through complex environments while remaining undetected herself. Most significantly, her stress optimization enabled peak performance in situations that would overwhelm conventional intelligence personnel. Maya, Webb explained during a break in the evaluation process, individuals with your capabilities are extraordinarily valuable for missions that require human intelligence gathering in hostile environments. Your enhanced awareness makes you nearly impossible to detect while allowing you to gather information that electronic surveillance couldn't access. But it was Dr. Foster's psychological evaluation that revealed the most significant aspects of Maya's enhanced inheritance. Her moral framework remained intact despite possessing capabilities that could be used for purposes that conflicted with conventional ethical principles. Her protective instincts were enhanced rather than diminished by her genetic modifications. Most importantly, her identity remained grounded in her role as someone who protected others rather than someone who dominated them. Enhanced individuals often struggle with the psychological implications of possessing capabilities that transcend normal human limitations, Foster explained during one of their sessions. The combination of exceptional abilities and continued exposure to normal society creates tensions that can lead to isolation, superiority complexes, or moral degradation. Your psychological profile suggests resilience to these pressures. The training regimen that emerged from Maya's evaluation was unlike anything offered through conventional military programs. Each day began with physical conditioning that pushed her enhanced capabilities toward their theoretical limits. Marksmanship training employed weapons and scenarios that would have been impossible for normal personnel to manage effectively. Tactical instruction covered situations that required capabilities beyond what conventional special operations training could address. But the most challenging aspect of Maya's development was learning to control abilities that seemed to operate through mechanisms her conscious mind couldn't fully understand. Her enhanced spatial awareness provided information about environmental conditions that her normal senses couldn't detect. Her intuitive tactical assessment allowed her to predict opponent behavior before it occurred. Her stress optimization enabled performance levels that seemed to violate known limitations of human physiology. Sergeant First Class Park served as Maya's primary instructor for capability integration, having successfully completed similar developments several years earlier. Maya, Park explained during their initial training session, enhanced abilities feel natural when they activate spontaneously. But learning to control them consciously requires understanding principles that conventional military training never addresses. The techniques Park taught combined meditation practices with tactical applications, teaching Maya to access enhanced states of awareness deliberately rather than waiting for crisis situations to trigger them automatically. The training was mentally exhausting in ways that physical conditioning never approached, requiring Maya to maintain conscious control over nervous system functions that normally operated below the threshold of awareness. Your grandfather received similar training during Operation Pinnacle, Park explained, but the techniques available then were primitive compared to what we've developed through decades of research with enhanced individuals. You're learning to access capabilities that he could only employ reactively during combat situations. Maya's marksmanship training revealed the full extent of her inherited capabilities under controlled conditions that allowed systematic development rather than crisis-driven activation. Using weapons that had been specially designed for enhanced personnel, she achieved accuracy levels that approached theoretical perfection. Her ability to compensate for environmental variables enabled precision shooting under conditions that would make accuracy impossible for conventional marksmen. The psychological implications of possessing such capabilities became apparent as Maya's training progressed. She was developing skills that made her potentially one of the most dangerous individuals on Earth, capable of eliminating virtually any target under virtually any circumstances. The knowledge that she could kill almost anyone, anywhere, at any time, created moral burdens that conventional military training hadn't prepared her to carry. Dr. Foster's counseling sessions focused heavily on helping Maya integrate enhanced capabilities with ethical principles that would prevent the superiority complexes and moral degradation that had affected some Operation Pinnacle participants. Maya, Foster explained, enhanced abilities create temptations that normal individuals never face. The knowledge that you could solve problems through violence that others must address through negotiation and compromise requires exceptional moral discipline to manage responsibly. The facility's records contain psychological profiles of enhanced individuals who'd struggled with these temptations, becoming isolated from normal society or developing contempt for people whose capabilities they'd transcended. Maya's training included exposure to these case studies as warnings about psychological pitfalls that enhanced development needed to avoid. Agent Wright's intelligence briefings provided context for understanding why Maya's development was considered strategically urgent. Foreign intelligence services had identified enhanced individuals operating in various countries, some of whom appeared to lack the moral constraints that made them suitable for defensive rather than aggressive operations. The possibility that hostile enhanced operatives might be deployed against American interests made development of ethical enhanced personnel a national security priority. Maya, Wright explained during a classified briefing that outlined international intelligence assessments, individuals with your capabilities operating without appropriate moral frameworks represent existential threats to democratic institutions. Enhanced operatives who answer only to themselves or to authoritarian governments could destabilize international relations in ways that conventional military forces couldn't counter. Maya's training included scenarios designed to test her moral decision-making under conditions that would challenge any ethical framework. Simulated missions presented situations where enhanced capabilities could be used to achieve strategic objectives through methods that violated principles of proportionality, discrimination, and human rights. Maya's responses consistently prioritized protection of innocent lives over tactical efficiency, confirming her suitability for operations that required enhanced capabilities combined with ethical constraints. But the most significant test of Maya's development came when she was presented with intelligence about actual threats that conventional military and law enforcement agencies couldn't address effectively. International arms trafficking networks that supplied weapons to terrorist organizations, human trafficking syndicates that exploited governmental corruption to operate with impunity, domestic extremist groups whose military training and equipment made them immune to normal law enforcement intervention. Maya, Mitchell explained during a briefing that outlined potential operational assignments. Your enhanced capabilities make you uniquely qualified to address threats that exist in the gaps between what conventional military forces can accomplish legally and what intelligence agencies can achieve without risking international incidents. The missions under consideration would require Maya to operate independently in hostile environments, using enhanced abilities to gather intelligence, eliminate specific threats, and extract without detection. Success would protect innocent lives and American interests while maintaining plausible deniability that prevented diplomatic complications. Failure could result in international incidents or loss of American enhanced personnel whose capabilities couldn't be replaced. Maya's decision to accept operational assignments marked her transition from enhanced individual undergoing development to active asset whose capabilities would be employed in missions that couldn't be acknowledged through official channels. But it also marked her acceptance of moral responsibilities that would test every principle she'd ever held sacred while determining whether enhanced human potential could be employed ethically in service of protecting innocent people from threats that conventional authorities couldn't address. The psychological evaluation that concluded Maya's development phase confirmed her readiness for operational deployment while identifying potential areas of concern that would require ongoing monitoring. Her enhanced capabilities had been successfully integrated with ethical frameworks that prioritized protection over domination. Her tactical skills had been developed to levels that made her effective against threats that challenged conventional military and intelligence personnel. Most importantly, her psychological stability had been maintained despite possessing abilities that could potentially corrupt individuals who lacked appropriate moral grounding. Maya, Dr. Foster concluded in her final assessment, you represent successful integration of enhanced human capabilities with ethical principles that make those capabilities suitable for protective rather than aggressive applications. Your deployment will serve as a test case for whether enhanced individuals can operate within democratic frameworks while maintaining accountability to principles that transcend individual judgment. The graduation ceremony that marked Maya's completion of advanced development was attended only by the personnel who'd overseen her training, a reflection of the classified nature of capabilities that couldn't be acknowledged publicly. But the significance of her achievement extended far beyond the small group of witnesses who understood what she'd accomplished. Maya had successfully navigated the transformation from exceptional individual to enhanced operative while maintaining moral principles that made her suitable for missions requiring capabilities beyond normal human parameters. Her success would determine whether enhanced individuals could serve democratic institutions without compromising the principles those institutions were designed to protect. Investigation and deeper truth, the intelligence briefing that would reveal The full scope of Operation Pinnacle's legacy took place in a secure facility buried 4 levels beneath the Pentagon, accessible only to personnel with clearances that reached beyond conventional military classification systems. Maya's escort through multiple security checkpoints included Agent Wright and a woman introduced only as Director Catherine Hayes, whose authority clearly extended far beyond what her understated appearance suggested. Present at the briefing were officials whose introductions came with titles that Maya hadn't known existed within the American intelligence apparatus. Deputy Director of Enhanced Personnel Operations, Chief of Genetic Inheritance Assessment, Senior Analyst for Exceptional Individual Monitoring. Each carried themselves with the careful neutrality of people accustomed to handling information that could reshape understanding of human potential and national security requirements. Maya, Director Hayes began, activating security protocols that created an electromagnetic barrier against any form of electronic surveillance. What you're about to learn represents 7 decades of classified research into human capability, enhancement, genetic inheritance factors, and operational applications that have never been acknowledged publicly. The presentation that followed would fundamentally alter Maya's understanding of her grandfather's military service, her own genetic inheritance, and the strategic context that made enhanced individuals valuable assets in contemporary intelligence. Operations. Operation Pinnacle hadn't been an isolated research program during the Korean conflict. It had been the first systematic attempt to understand and develop human capabilities that transcended normal limitations. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation despite sharing Maya's surname, served as chief researcher for genetic inheritance assessment, and had spent 15 years studying the descendants of Operation Pinnacle participants. Maya, Dr. Chen explained, consulting files that contained information about enhanced individuals worldwide. Your grandfather was part of a cohort that displayed capabilities we still don't fully understand. The genetic analysis conducted on Maya during her development had revealed modifications that went beyond anything Operation Pinnacle researchers had documented in their historical records. Her nervous system showed optimization for information processing speeds that approached theoretical maximums. Her muscular coordination displayed efficiency that seemed to transcend normal biomechanical limitations. Most remarkably, her stress response system appeared to have been modified to enhance rather than degrade performance under extreme pressure. Vincent Chun's service record indicates exceptional performance during classified operations in Korea, Dr. Chun continued, but his capabilities were never systematically measured using techniques available today. Based on your genetic profile, we believe he possessed enhancements that Operation Pinnacle researchers couldn't adequately assess with 1950s technology. Agent Wright's intelligence briefing provided operational context for understanding why enhanced individuals had become strategic priorities for contemporary military and intelligence agencies. Maya, Wright explained, showing satellite imagery of facilities in various countries that appeared to be conducting similar research. Foreign intelligence services have their own programs for identifying and developing enhanced personnel. The international competition for exceptional individuals had intensified dramatically in recent years as governments recognized the strategic advantages that enhanced operatives could provide. Nations with successful enhancement programs possessed capabilities for intelligence gathering, targeted elimination, and special operations that conventional military forces couldn't match. The possibility that hostile enhanced operatives might be deployed against American interests made development of ethical enhanced personnel a matter of national survival. But the most disturbing revelation concerned enhanced individuals who'd been recruited by foreign intelligence services or criminal organizations whose moral frameworks didn't constrain their operational employment. Intelligence reports described enhanced operatives conducting assassinations, intelligence operations, and terrorism that conventional security measures couldn't prevent or counter effectively. Maya, Director Hayes explained, Individuals with capabilities like yours, operating without appropriate ethical constraints, represent existential threats to democratic institutions and international stability. Enhanced operatives who answer only to themselves or to authoritarian governments could destabilize global political systems in ways that conventional military or intelligence responses couldn't address. The briefing materials included psychological profiles of enhanced individuals who'd been identified through various intelligence channels, many of whom displayed capabilities similar to Maya's but lacked the moral frameworks that made them suitable for defensive rather than aggressive operations. Some had been corrupted by the knowledge of their superior abilities, developing contempt for normal humans that made them unsuitable for operations requiring discrimination and proportionality. Others had been recruited by organizations whose objectives included destabilizing democratic governments and international institutions. Dr. Foster's presentation addressed the psychological challenges that enhanced individuals faced when integrating exceptional capabilities with normal social relationships and moral responsibilities. Maya, Foster explained, enhanced abilities create tensions that most people never experience. The knowledge that you could solve virtually any problem through violence that others must address through negotiation and compromise requires exceptional moral discipline to manage responsibly. The case studies Foster presented included enhanced individuals who'd struggled with these tensions, becoming isolated from normal society or developing psychological disorders that made them unsuitable for operational deployment. Some had suffered what researchers called capability dysphoria, a condition where enhanced individuals became unable to function effectively in normal social contexts because of the vast disparity between their abilities and those of the people around them. Part 3. The choice and commitment, the decision that would define Maya's future came during a thunderstorm that lashed the Blue Ridge Mountains with rain that turned the facility's windows into flowing sheets of water. She sat alone in her quarters, a Spartan room that felt more like a monastery cell than military housing, contemplating an offer that would permanently separate her from the life she'd known before that day at Norfolk Naval Station. The classified documents spread across her desk outlined operational requirements that went far beyond anything described in conventional military job classifications. Enhanced Personnel Specialist, Strategic Asset Coordinator, Exceptional Capability, Operative. The euphemistic titles couldn't disguise the reality that she was being recruited for missions that would require her to use genetic modifications inherited from her grandfather's participation in research that most people believed was science fiction. Maya's conversation with her mother the previous evening had crystallized the weight of the choice she faced. Linda Chen's voice, over the secure telephone line, had carried the concern of someone watching her daughter disappear into a world that couldn't be explained or shared. "I know your grandfather saw something special in you during those summers at the farm," Linda had said, "but I never imagined it would lead to whatever you're involved in now." The inability to discuss the truth about her enhanced capabilities with anyone outside the classified program created an isolation that Maya was only beginning to understand. Her sister Amy, currently in her 3rd year of medical school, had noticed the change in Maya's communication since her enlistment. "You sound different," Amy had observed during their last conversation. "Like you're carrying something heavy that you can't put down." The psychological burden of possessing abilities that transcended normal human limitations, while being unable to share that knowledge with the people she cared about, was something Dr. Foster had warned her to expect. Enhanced individuals often found themselves growing distant from family and friends who couldn't understand the responsibilities and temptations that came with genetic optimization. The choice to accept operational deployment would intensify that isolation while making it permanent. Master Sergeant Vasquez had been remarkably direct about the personal costs associated with enhanced operations during their final training session. Maya, he'd said while they reviewed tactical scenarios that required capabilities beyond normal human parameters. Individuals with your abilities who choose operational careers sacrifice normal relationships and conventional life. Expectations. The missions require complete commitment because the stakes are too high for anything less. The operational briefings Maya had received painted a picture of threats that conventional military and intelligence personnel couldn't address effectively. International arms trafficking networks whose security measures were designed by former special operations personnel. Terrorist organizations whose training and equipment rivaled those of national military forces. Criminal syndicates whose corruption of governmental institutions made them immune to normal law enforcement intervention. But the missions that most concerned Maya were those involving enhanced individuals who'd been recruited by hostile intelligence services or criminal organizations. Intelligence reports described operatives whose capabilities matched her own, but whose moral frameworks had been corrupted by exposure to authoritarian ideologies or criminal incentives. The possibility of facing enhanced opponents in combat situations created tactical challenges that conventional military training couldn't adequately address. Lieutenant Webb's intelligence assessments had been particularly sobering regarding the international scope of enhanced individual recruitment and deployment. Maya, Webb had explained during a classified briefing that outlined foreign enhancement programs. Several nations have active programs for identifying and developing enhanced personnel, but their operational employment often lacks the ethical constraints that limit American enhanced operations. The satellite imagery Webb had shown revealed facilities in various countries that appeared to be conducting research similar to Operation Pinnacle, but with objectives that prioritized capability enhancement over moral development. Intelligence. Analysts believed these programs were producing enhanced operatives whose primary qualifications were tactical effectiveness rather than ethical suitability for missions requiring discrimination and proportionality. Maya's study of historical enhanced operations revealed patterns that troubled her despite their operational success. Enhanced personnel deployed without adequate moral frameworks had achieved tactical objectives while creating strategic complications that conventional military forces were left to resolve. The combination of exceptional capabilities with inadequate ethical constraints had produced results that technically accomplished mission goals while violating principles that democratic institutions were designed to protect. The most disturbing case studies involved enhanced individuals who'd been deployed for political assassinations, industrial espionage, and terrorism that served strategic objectives but violated international law and moral principles that distinguish democratic operations from authoritarian ones. Maya realized that accepting operational deployment would require her to navigate moral complexities that conventional military training never addressed while maintaining ethical standards that some enhanced personnel had abandoned. Agent Wright's final briefing had focused on the strategic context that made Maya's decision significant beyond her personal preferences and career goals. Maya, Wright had explained, the international competition for enhanced personnel has created situations where American interests require capabilities that only enhanced operatives can provide ethically and effectively. The threats outlined in Wright's assessment included scenarios where conventional military or intelligence responses would be inadequate, inappropriate, or impossible to deploy without creating diplomatic complications that could destabilize international relations. Enhanced operatives could accomplish objectives that protected American interests while maintaining plausible deniability that prevented escalation into conventional conflicts. But Wright had also been honest about the psychological costs associated with enhanced operations. Maya, he'd said, individuals with your capabilities who accept operational deployment often find themselves isolated from normal society by knowledge and experiences that can't be shared. The missions require decisions and actions that change How enhanced personnel relate to conventional moral frameworks and social relationships. Maya's grandfather's journals, which had been declassified for her review during the decision process, provided insight into the personal struggles that Operation Pinnacle participants had faced when integrating enhanced capabilities with normal civilian life after military service. Vincent Chen's entries revealed someone who'd been haunted by the knowledge of what he could accomplish while being unable to use those capabilities except in circumstances that threatened innocent lives. The enhancement changes how you see the world. Her grandfather had written an entry dated 3 years after his discharge from military service. Normal problems that trouble other people seem trivial when you know you could solve them easily through means they can't imagine. But using enhanced abilities for personal advantage violates principles that make the enhancement worthwhile. The burden is knowing you could help while understanding that helping inappropriately would corrupt the gift. The moral framework that had guided Vincent Chen's use of enhanced abilities throughout his civilian life provided a template for understanding how Maya might integrate operational capabilities with ethical principles that transcended tactical effectiveness. Her grandfather had used his enhancement to protect people who couldn't protect themselves while avoiding applications that would compromise the principles that made protection worthwhile. Dr. Morrison's genetic counseling had addressed the hereditary aspects of enhancement that would affect any children Maya might have in the future. Maya, Morrison had explained, genetic modifications that produce enhanced capabilities appear to be dominant traits that pass to offspring with high probability. Any children you have would likely inherit capabilities similar to yours, creating responsibilities for their development and protection that normal parents never face. The possibility that Maya's enhanced capabilities would be inherited by future generations added intergenerational responsibilities to her decision about operational deployment. Children who inherited enhancement would face the same choices about capability development and operational employment that Maya was currently confronting. The decisions she made about ethical frameworks and operational principles would influence how enhanced capabilities were employed by future generations. Colonel Mitchell's final counseling session had focused on helping Maya understand the full implications of accepting operational deployment while ensuring that her decision was based on complete information about what enhanced operations required. Maya, Mitchell had said, enhanced operatives often find their personal relationships strained by the inability to share experiences and knowledge that define their professional lives. The isolation can be profound, but it's necessary for maintaining operational security and protecting the people you care about. The security requirements associated with enhanced operations meant that Maya would be unable to discuss her work with family members, civilian friends, or anyone outside the classified program. Her cover identity would provide plausible explanations for her activities, but the deception required would create barriers between herself and the people whose relationships had previously defined her sense of identity and purpose. Maya's decision was ultimately influenced by her memory of the University of Northern Iowa shooting and her recognition that conventional security measures couldn't protect innocent people from threats that required enhanced capabilities to address effectively. The 17 students whose lives she'd saved during that crisis represented the kind of protection that enhanced operatives could provide when deployed ethically and appropriately. But her decision was also shaped by her understanding that enhanced capabilities carried moral responsibilities that couldn't be avoided or delegated to others. The knowledge that she could eliminate virtually any threat to innocent people created obligations that transcended personal preferences about career choices and lifestyle decisions. Enhanced abilities were gifts that came with duties that couldn't be refused without abandoning people who might die because she'd chosen personal comfort over moral responsibility. The acceptance letter Maya submitted to Colonel Mitchell was brief but comprehensive in its commitment to operational deployment. and ethical employment of enhanced capabilities. I understand the personal costs associated with enhanced operations, she wrote, but I also understand the moral responsibilities that enhanced capabilities create. I'm prepared to accept operational deployment with the understanding that my primary obligation is protecting innocent people from threats that conventional security measures can't address. Mitchell's response had been immediate and decisive. Maya, she'd said during their final meeting before operational deployment, your commitment to ethical employment of enhanced capabilities makes you suitable for missions that require exceptional discrimination and moral judgment. The operations you'll undertake will test every principle you've expressed, but they'll also provide opportunities to protect people whose lives depend on capabilities that only enhanced operatives can provide. The graduation ceremony that marked Maya's transition from development to operational status was attended by the personnel who'd overseen her training, along with officials whose presence indicated the strategic significance of enhanced operations within contemporary military and intelligence structures. Director Hayes personally presented Maya with credentials that would provide access to resources and authorities that conventional military personnel never encountered. Maya, Hayes said during the brief ceremony, enhanced operatives represent America's response to threats that transcend the capabilities of conventional military and intelligence assets. Your deployment marks the beginning of operations that will determine whether enhanced individuals can serve democratic institutions while maintaining accountability to principles that transcend tactical effectiveness. The operational briefing that followed outlined Maya's first assignment, a mission that would test her enhanced capabilities while establishing patterns for ethical employment of genetic optimization in service of protecting innocent people from threats that conventional authorities couldn't address. The target was an international arms trafficking network whose security measures and operational scope made them immune to normal law enforcement intervention. But the mission would also test Maya's ability to employ enhanced capabilities while maintaining moral constraints that distinguish democratic operations from authoritarian ones. The arms dealers were responsible for supplying weapons to terrorist organizations that had killed hundreds of innocent people, but they operated through networks that included family members and associates whose involvement was limited or coerced. Maya's enhanced capabilities would allow her to eliminate the trafficking network while minimizing collateral damage that conventional military operations couldn't avoid. But the mission would require her to make tactical decisions that could determine whether enhanced operations served democratic principles or violated them in pursuit of strategic objectives. The final briefing session included psychological preparation for the moral complexities that enhanced operations typically involved. Dr. Foster's guidance focused on maintaining ethical frameworks under conditions that would challenge any moral system. Maya, Foster explained, enhanced operations often present situations where all available options involve moral compromise. Your responsibility is choosing options that minimize harm while accomplishing objectives that protect innocent people. Maya's departure from Camp Blackwater marked the end of her development phase and the beginning of operational deployment that would test whether enhanced individuals could serve democratic institutions while maintaining accountability to principles that transcended tactical effectiveness. The person leaving the facility was fundamentally different from the college track coach, who demonstrated impossible marksmanship at Norfolk Naval Station, but the moral framework that guided her actions remained grounded in her commitment to protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. The helicopter that carried Maya toward her first operational assignment flew through storm clouds that mirrored the moral complexities she would face in missions that required enhanced capabilities, combined with ethical constraints that some enhanced personnel had abandoned. Her choice to accept operational deployment had committed her to a career that would test every principle she'd ever held sacred while determining whether genetic optimization could be employed ethically in service of protecting innocent people. from threats that conventional authorities couldn't address. The briefing materials for her first mission lay open in her lap as the aircraft navigated through turbulence that seemed to reflect the uncertain nature of enhanced operations in a world where technological capabilities were advancing faster than moral frameworks for employing them responsibly. Maya's enhanced abilities would allow her to accomplish objectives that protected American interests and innocent lives. But success would depend on her ability to maintain ethical constraints that distinguished democratic operations from authoritarian ones. As the helicopter descended toward the staging area for her first mission, Maya realized that her grandfather's legacy extended beyond genetic modifications that enhanced her capabilities. Vincent Chen had passed down a moral framework that made enhanced abilities suitable for protecting rather than dominating others. The missions ahead would test whether that framework could be maintained under operational conditions that challenged every ethical principle democratic institutions were designed to protect. The operational assignment that awaited Maya would determine whether enhanced individuals could serve democratic principles while employing capabilities that transcended normal human limitations. Her success would establish patterns for ethical employment of genetic optimization that future enhanced operatives would follow. Her failure could result in the abandonment of moral constraints that distinguished democratic enhanced operations from authoritarian ones. Maya's commitment to protecting innocent people had guided her through development training that prepared her for missions requiring capabilities beyond normal human parameters. Now that commitment would be tested in operational conditions where enhanced abilities could be employed ethically to serve democratic principles or misused to serve tactical objectives that violated the moral frameworks that made enhanced capabilities worthwhile. The storm that surrounded the helicopter as it approached the staging area seemed to mirror the moral complexities that enhanced operations involved. But Maya's enhanced awareness allowed her to navigate through turbulence that would have disoriented conventional personnel. Her genetic inheritance provided capabilities that made her suitable for missions that conventional military and intelligence assets couldn't accomplish. But her moral inheritance from her grandfather provided the ethical framework that made those capabilities suitable for democratic rather than authoritarian employment. Advanced Development and Testing, the facility that Maya entered after accepting operational deployment, existed in a classified location that appeared on no maps and was accessible only through transportation methods that involved multiple security clearances and background checks that reached levels she'd never known existed. Hidden beneath a mountain range that provided natural protection against electronic surveillance, the installation represented decades of research into human capability, enhancement, and operational applications that pushed genetic optimization beyond theoretical limitations. Dr. Marcus Kellerman served as Director of Advanced Enhancement Research and had spent 20 years studying the descendants of Operation Pinnacle participants while developing techniques for capability amplification that went far beyond what 1950s military research had achieved. Maya, Kellerman explained during their initial meeting, your genetic profile suggests potential for enhancement levels that your grandfather's generation never accessed. We're going to explore those possibilities systematically. The testing protocols that followed were unlike anything Maya had experienced during her development at Camp Blackwater. Each evaluation pushed her capabilities toward theoretical maximums while monitoring physiological responses that indicated how much enhancement her nervous system could integrate safely. The research team was particularly interested in stress response optimization, spatial awareness expansion, and information processing acceleration that might allow Maya to function effectively in operational environments that would overwhelm conventional personnel. The marksmanship testing revealed capabilities that transcended anything documented in military research databases. Using weapons that had been specially designed for enhanced personnel, Maya achieved accuracy levels that approached mathematical perfection across distances and conditions that made precision impossible for normal shooters. Her ability to compensate for environmental variables seemed to operate through mechanisms that her conscious mind couldn't fully understand, but that produced results that defied conventional ballistics calculations. "Maya," explained Chief Weapons Specialist Amanda Torres, who'd worked with enhanced personnel for 8 years, "your marksmanship abilities suggest neural optimization that allows real-time calculation of variables that conventional shooters must estimate approximately. You're processing wind speed, atmospheric pressure, target movement, and weapon characteristics simultaneously while making adjustments that conventional training couldn't replicate." The physical conditioning protocols designed for Maya's enhancement level required equipment and techniques that had been developed specifically for individuals whose capabilities exceeded normal human parameters. Standard military fitness assessments were inadequate for measuring performance that operated beyond recognized limitations of human physiology. Maya's cardiovascular efficiency, muscular coordination, and endurance capabilities suggested genetic optimization that had been dormant until activated by systematic enhancement procedures. Master Sergeant Deanna Park, who'd completed similar enhancements several years earlier, served as Maya's primary instructor for advanced capability integration. "Maya," Park explained during their first training session, "accessing enhanced abilities consciously rather than reactively requires understanding principles that conventional military training never addresses. You're learning to control nervous system functions that normally operate below conscious awareness." The meditation techniques Park taught combined ancient practices with contemporary neuroscience, enabling Maya to access enhanced states of consciousness that amplified her genetic capabilities while maintaining psychological stability. The training was mentally exhausting in ways that physical conditioning never approached, requiring Maya to maintain conscious control over autonomic functions while integrating enhanced awareness with tactical applications. "Your grandfather received similar training during Operation Pinnacle," Park explained, "but the techniques available then were primitive compared to what decades of research with enhanced individuals have produced. You're learning to access capabilities that he could only employ reactively during crisis situations." The tactical training scenarios were designed to test Maya's enhanced capabilities under conditions that simulated operational environments where conventional military personnel would be ineffective or inappropriate for deployment. Urban surveillance operations that required tracking multiple subjects while remaining undetected. Precision elimination missions that demanded capabilities beyond what normal snipers could accomplish. Intelligence gathering assignments that involved infiltrating secure facilities protected by technology and personnel trained to counter conventional espionage techniques. Dr. Sarah Kim served as chief psychologist for enhanced personnel and conducted evaluations that monitored Maya's psychological integration of capabilities that could potentially corrupt individuals who lacked appropriate moral frameworks. "Maya," Kim explained, "enhanced abilities create temptations that normal people never face. The knowledge that you could solve virtually any problem through violence that others must address through negotiation requires exceptional moral discipline to manage responsibly." The psychological monitoring revealed that Maya's moral framework remained intact, despite possessing capabilities that transcended normal human limitations. Her protective instincts were enhanced rather than diminished by genetic optimization. Her identity remained grounded in her role as someone who protected others rather than someone who dominated them. Most importantly, her enhancement seemed to amplify rather than compromise the ethical principles that made her suitable for democratic rather than authoritarian operational employment. The intelligence training component introduced Maya to operational requirements that went far beyond conventional military or intelligence applications. Enhanced personnel were expected to function independently in hostile environments while gathering information, eliminating specific threats, and extracting without detection. Success required combining enhanced capabilities with tactical knowledge that could only be acquired through systematic instruction in techniques that conventional training never addressed. Agent Lisa Rodriguez, who specialized in enhanced personnel operational preparation, conducted briefings that outlined mission parameters Maya would encounter during deployment. Maya, Rodriguez explained, enhanced operations typically involve situations where conventional military or intelligence responses would be inadequate, inappropriate, or impossible without creating diplomatic complications that could destabilize international relations. The operational scenarios Rodriguez described included missions where Maya's enhanced capabilities would allow her to accomplish objectives that protected American interests while maintaining plausible deniability that prevented escalation into conventional conflicts. Arms trafficking networks whose security measures made them immune to normal law enforcement intervention. Terrorist organizations whose training and equipment rivaled those of national military forces. Criminal syndicates whose corruption of governmental institutions made them immune to conventional justice systems. But the most challenging operational requirements involved enhanced individuals who'd been recruited by hostile intelligence services or criminal organizations. Intelligence reports described operatives whose capabilities matched Maya's but whose moral frameworks had been corrupted by exposure to authoritarian ideologies or criminal incentives. The possibility of facing enhanced opponents in combat situations created tactical challenges that conventional military training couldn't adequately address. Dr. Kellerman's research into enhanced combat techniques revealed that conventional tactical doctrine was inadequate for conflicts between individuals whose capabilities transcended normal human limitations. Enhanced operatives required specialized training in techniques that exploited genetic optimization while maintaining ethical constraints that distinguished democratic operations from authoritarian ones. Maya, Kellerman explained during a briefing that outlined enhanced combat methodology. Conventional military tactics assume opponents with normal human capabilities. Enhanced operations require understanding how genetic optimization affects tactical decision-making, reaction times, and strategic planning in ways that conventional training never addresses. The combat training that followed introduced Maya to techniques that had been developed through research with enhanced personnel over several decades. Movement patterns that exploited enhanced spatial awareness while avoiding detection by conventional surveillance systems. Engagement strategies that utilized enhanced reaction times while maintaining operational security. Tactical planning that incorporated enhanced information processing while preserving mission flexibility that conventional operations required. The weapons training revealed the full extent of Maya's enhanced marksmanship capabilities under operational conditions that simulated real-world deployment scenarios. Using equipment that had been designed specifically for enhanced personnel, she achieved accuracy levels that approached theoretical perfection while engaging multiple targets under conditions that would challenge conventional special operations. Personnel. Maya, explained weapons specialist Jennifer Hayes, who'd trained enhanced personnel for 6 years. Your marksmanship abilities suggest neural optimization that allows instantaneous calculation of ballistic variables that conventional shooters require extensive training to approximate. You're processing environmental conditions and weapon characteristics in real time, while making adjustments that seem to violate known limitations of human reaction speed. The psychological evaluation that concluded Maya's advanced training phase confirmed her readiness for operational deployment, while identifying areas that would require ongoing monitoring during mission assignments. Her enhanced capabilities had been successfully integrated with ethical frameworks that prioritize protection over domination. Her tactical skills had been developed to levels that made her effective against threats that challenged conventional military and intelligence personnel. Most importantly, her psychological stability had been maintained despite possessing abilities that could potentially corrupt individuals who lacked appropriate moral grounding. Maya, Dr. Kim concluded in her final assessment, you represent successful integration of enhanced human capabilities with ethical principles that make those capabilities suitable for democratic rather than authoritarian operational employment. Your deployment will test whether enhanced individuals can maintain accountability to moral frameworks that transcend tactical effectiveness. The graduation ceremony that marked Maya's completion of advanced enhancement was attended by officials whose presence indicated the strategic significance of enhanced operations within contemporary national security structures. Director Catherine Hayes personally reviewed Maya's performance assessments while outlining operational requirements that would define her career as an enhanced operative. Maya, Hayes explained, enhanced operatives represent America's response to threats that transcend the capabilities of conventional military and intelligence assets. Your deployment will determine whether enhanced individuals can serve democratic institutions while maintaining accountability to principles that distinguish our operations from those of authoritarian regimes. The operational briefing that followed outlined Maya's first assignment, a mission that would test her enhanced capabilities while establishing precedents for ethical employment of genetic optimization in service of protecting innocent people from threats that conventional authorities couldn't address. The target was an international arms trafficking network whose operational security and strategic scope made them immune to normal law enforcement intervention. The briefing materials revealed that the trafficking network was responsible for supplying weapons to terrorist organizations that had killed hundreds of innocent people across multiple continents. Their security measures included former special operations personnel, advanced surveillance technology, and corruption of governmental institutions that made them immune to conventional justice systems. The network's elimination would prevent future terrorist attacks while demonstrating enhanced operational capabilities that could deter similar organizations. But the mission would also test Maya's ability to employ enhanced capabilities while maintaining moral constraints that distinguished democratic operations from authoritarian ones. The trafficking network included family members and associates whose involvement was limited or coerced, requiring tactical decisions that minimized collateral damage while accomplishing strategic objectives that protected innocent people. Maya's enhanced capabilities would allow her to eliminate the trafficking network while avoiding the collateral damage that conventional military operations couldn't prevent. But success would require maintaining ethical frameworks under operational conditions that would challenge any moral system while accomplishing objectives that served democratic principles rather than tactical convenience. The final preparation session included psychological counseling designed to prepare Maya for the moral complexities that enhanced operations typically involved. Dr. Kim's guidance focused on maintaining ethical constraints under conditions that would test every principle Maya had ever held sacred. Maya, Kim explained, enhanced operations often present situations where all available options involve moral compromise. Your responsibility is choosing options that minimize harm while accomplishing objectives that protect innocent people. The decisions you make will establish patterns that future enhanced operatives will follow. Maya's departure from the Advanced Enhancement Facility marked her transition to operational status as an enhanced operative, whose capabilities would be employed in missions that tested whether genetic optimization could serve democratic principles, while maintaining accountability to moral frameworks that transcended tactical effectiveness. The person leaving the facility was someone whose abilities approached the theoretical limits of human potential, but whose identity remained grounded in her commitment to protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. The transportation that carried Maya toward her first operational assignment moved through security protocols that indicated the classified nature of enhanced operations within contemporary military and intelligence structures. Her enhanced awareness processed environmental information that revealed details about operational security, measures that protected enhanced personnel while maintaining the secrecy that prevented foreign intelligence services from understanding American enhanced capabilities. The mission briefing materials that accompanied Maya outlined objectives that would test her enhanced capabilities, while establishing precedents for ethical employment of genetic optimization that future enhanced operatives would follow. Success would demonstrate that enhanced individuals could serve democratic institutions while maintaining moral constraints that distinguish their operations from those of authoritarian regimes. Failure could result in the abandonment of ethical frameworks that made enhanced capabilities suitable for democratic rather than authoritarian employment. As Maya prepared for her first operational deployment, she realized that her grandfather's legacy extended beyond genetic modifications that enhanced her capabilities. Vincent Chen had provided a moral framework that made enhanced abilities suitable for protecting rather than dominating others. The missions ahead would test whether that framework could be maintained under operational conditions that challenged every ethical principle democratic institutions were designed to protect. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.